Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. I'm Vadim Perlovsky. We are joined today by the Springbank Distillery. Joining us from Springbank is Grant Macpherson. Grant's been with the company for over 20 years, so we're super excited to have you here, learn all we can about the brand. There's a lot about Springbank to unfold, and I'm very excited to get to learn about it from someone as seasoned as yourself. I know we have some amazing Springbank fans here, and some newbies like myself who really want to become fans of the brand. So joining us today is the Los Angeles Whiskey and Spirits Guild, and the president of the guild is David Donahue. David, do you want to say a couple of words?
Thank you very much, Vadim. Appreciate it, and for all the work I know you put into making this happen and bringing it to the Los Angeles Whiskey and Spirits Guild. So, on behalf of everybody that's here and everybody who should be here, thank you. Really appreciate it. For anybody who's new, welcome. This is going to be a truly immersive dive and experience, as these virtual tastings always are. And Grant, I got to tell you, been looking forward to this as soon as Vadim talked about it. So I'm going to just really anticipating this afternoon. And the fact that we're going to be going through 9 expressions at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I see a nap in my future. So welcome.
Grant, we appreciate you making the time. Thank you so much, David. I see a lot of familiar faces. I think today is just about everybody's a regular. If anybody is new, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Sorry about that. Can you hear me? Yep. Housekeeping, little things. Welcome to participate. Please do use the chat, share your tasting notes, ask questions. That's why we're all here for. It's not a one-way TV show. We're here to participate. That said, if you're not speaking actively, please keep yourself on mute so we don't have background noise and people talking over each other and whatnot, because it does happen. If I see that you're not muted and you aren't talking, I will help to mute you. So please don't be offended if that happens by accident and you're meaning to say something in a half a second. Just send me a message. We'll be happy to unmute you and you can participate. But without further ado, I want to pass it over to Mr. Grant to tell us a little introduction of yourself. And then you said you had a presentation on the brand, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, as Vadim says, my name is Grant Macpherson. I'm the UK sales manager for Springbank. I've been with the company for 22 years, doing various different roles within that 22 years, like working in the whiskey shop. For a good number of years, I was actually the sales manager for Cadenhead. So I was traveling around the world doing sort of tastings, trade shows for Cadenheads. Became the shop manager for a good number of years as well. And then for the last sort of 7 years, been on the road again in the UK, doing tastings, trade shows, etc. So it's all good fun. Great company to work for. I'm born and bred in Campbelltown, so I've lived in Campbelltown all my life. So I know a wee bit about the area, and certainly, hopefully, after working for 22 years with Springbank, I know a few things about the distillery as well. But yeah, we've got a cracking lineup. I was in 9 whiskies. I have only got 5 of them in front of me to try. I don't have a few of the ones you're trying, but what I'll do, I'll introduce them, and then maybe amongst yourselves you can sort of describe the flavour profile in these whiskies that I don't have in front of me. So I've got a wee presentation. This gives you a little insight to the region of Campbelltown, and it's like a tour of the distillery. So because if we're out and about, we're always saying it's a working museum. It's an old-fashioned way of making whiskey, and a lot of people have not been to Springbank, so showing a lot of photographs and some little videos, it just gives you a wee insight to what we do and what's so special about Springbank Distillery. But yeah, as William says, feel free to ask any questions throughout the tasting. Also, the kind of little presentation I'll stop throughout it and introduce the whiskey, and obviously we're starting in the maltings, working right through to the bottling. So if there is any questions regarding sort of this, the distillation point, I will be talking about that at some point during the presentation. Okay, but yeah, feel free to ask any questions throughout the tasting. So
Grant, I know we usually ask in our tastings what order we're going to go in. I know it's a lot to list off, and I'm going to toss that in the chat because you told me the order earlier. Should we pre-pour the cask strength expressions and let them open up? while we wait?
Sometimes, yeah, it can help. It certainly, sometimes if you're pouring in whiskey, it does help, and especially with cask strength, just to let them breathe and sort of, like you say, open up a wee bit. So yeah, feel free. So yeah, if you put on the chat the order, we're going to sample them in, and then people can.
Let me read it off real quick, because the people that are going to be watching the recording obviously can't see the chat. So I'll just read it off so that anyone following at home can play along. We're going to be tasting the 10-year regular release, 46% or first. So 10-year, 15-year, 18-year. So that's all 46. Then we're going to go to the 10-year-old barley at 56.2, 12-year-old cask strength, 12-year-old Burgundy, 17-year-old Madeira, 8-year-old sherry cask, single cask at 56.3, and then finish off with the 27-year-old independently bottled, bottled in 1974. So yeah, if you have a bottle of that or so at home laying around, feel free to pour that, let it open up. I want to thank Kwa for organizing this entire lineup for us. It's his birthday tasting after all. He was able to help us source every single one of these. So we essentially raided his cabinet to make that happen. So thank you, Kwa.
Good. So yeah, so let's give you a little insight to the region. Well, Campbelltown used to be described as the whiskey capital of the world. There used to be approximately 34 distilleries in Campbelltown, and everybody asks why so many distilleries in such a small town. Well, the main reason behind it is we have everything here for making whiskey. Well, from the farmers growing the barley, there was a coal mine out at Macpherson, just outside Campbelltown. There was ample peat source. And probably the biggest thing was Campbelltown Lock itself, where the ships used to come in, loading that with whiskey and taking it across to the Ayrshire coast for big blending companies. So it certainly suited the area for making whiskey. Unfortunately, yeah, there's only 3 distilleries left in Campbelltown. So we've got Springbank Distillery, and we've got Glengyle Distillery in the company as well, and then there's also Glen Scotia Distillery. So there is 3 distilleries. So we are still recognised as a whiskey region. And the recent talk over the last month is there is possibility of another 3 distilleries opening up in Campbelltown. So there is people looking at various different options for opening distilleries in Campbelltown, which will be good. It's all sort of good for the regional status, and obviously will benefit the town overall as well.
Since you touched on that, isn't Kilkerran under your portfolio?
Yep, so Kilkerran, so that's under Glengyle. So it's Kilkerran distilled at Glengyle Distillery. So yep, it's under our portfolio.
Rumor has it, or so I heard, that Springbank opened essentially Glengyle to keep the region status alive, because at a certain point you were down to 2 and you need at least 3 to still be a region.
Yeah, around about the year 2000, the Scottish Whisky Association are trying to say Campbelltown, no longer a region. They wanted to classify as a Highland region. And we weren't happy with this. We obviously the history, the heritage in Campbelltown regarding making whiskey. And we went back to them and says, well, we're actually thinking about opening another distillery, and then there'll be 3, same as a lowland region at that time. So why couldn't we keep our regional status? So yeah, we came back and says, if we have got 3 distilleries, we could keep a regional status. And it got us thinking, do we build a brand new distillery or try and resurrect one of the old distilleries in Campbelltown? And that's what we thought. Well, the chairman of Springbank is the great-great-grandson. So Glengyle Distillery was actually owned by his great-great-uncle. So sort of bring it back in the family. So I think it was quite good for us as well. And the Mitchell family played a huge part in distilleries of Campbelltown. There used to be 5 distilleries under the Mitchell name, from Springbank, Ray Clachan, Glengyle, Tobermory, and Dromore distilleries. So yeah, big sort of family name within the whiskey world of Campbelltown.
That's wonderful. We'll have to talk about a Glengyle distillery tasting at some point.
Yeah, I mean, Kilkerran range is doing fantastic for us. Now got 16-year-old on the market now as well. So yeah, we've got a good portfolio building up of the Kilkerran range, and everybody just loves it as well, which is really, really good. And it's got some similarities to Springbank, but it does stand on its own as well, which is what we want. Because a lot of people thought, oh, if it's using Springbank maltings, is there going to be, is it just another Springbank? Well, it's got the Campbelltown regional status there, but it certainly stands on its own as well, which is fantastic for us. There's another picture of Campbelltown. So you can see Campbelltown in the distance there, and that is Campbelltown. That is such a small town. Population is about 6,500 people, and you think 34 distilleries in such a small town. And yeah, they were situated very, very close together. And just outside Campbelltown, as you can see the runway here, very long runway. It's actually at one point was the third longest runway in Europe. And it used to be on standby for NASA as well, one of these claims to fame as well. So I've never used, but it used to be a huge military presence. So it used to a kind of military port for base, for doing different exercises, etc. But you can fly, there's a flight from Glasgow to Campbelltown daily, or 2 flights a day. You're in the air for like 25 minutes from Glasgow, so you can fly to Campbelltown. If not, by road from Glasgow is talking about 3.5, 4 hours. So certainly, it's not the easiest place to get to, but worthwhile. I think we should just start off, because we're 9 whiskies, I think we should just start off with whiskey number 1. So the first whiskey you're going to try is the Springbank 10-year-old. This is the flagship of the Springbank range. Everybody does talk about the Springbank 10-year-old. It is one of my favorite drams and out of the range. It's, even though I've tried so many different Springbanks throughout my time working at the company, Springbank 10-year-old, it's always one you can go back to. The quality and reliability of it against the price is fantastic. So the Springbank 10-year-old is a mixture of bourbon and sherry cask maturation. It's about 6% bourbon and 40% sherry casks used for so it's a kind of marriage process of different casks. It's light, floral, fruity notes to it, but that nice sort of sweetness from the sherry cask as well. And you get that true Springbank salty maritime influence there in the background as well. Also, the Springbank range bottled at 46%. We don't chill filter, we don't add caramel colouring, so all natural colour. And even interesting fact, sometimes if you want to experiment, put a bottle of Springbank in the fridge overnight and bring it out, it will go cloudy and hazy, and it's just a sort of true natural occurrence of whiskey that's not been chill filtered, and that cloudy haziness will disappear if you return it to room temperature.
You mentioned that you can see Campbelltown. Oh, I was going to say you can see Campbelltown on the previous slide, but I wonder if it's behind the. Do you see the downloading presentation icon there? Because I see it on my screen.
I can see everybody should see it, hopefully.
Yeah, the little pop-up in the middle.
Yeah, can you see that? Can you?
We do, yeah.
All right, okay, let's see if I can get into that. It's the chat function. Let's see. Better?
Nope, still there. I wonder if you can just X out of it. It's all good. We can continue. Yeah. It's all good.
All good. Perfect. So yeah, there's another picture of Campbelltown. So yeah, such a small town, and then you see the port there as well for where the ships used to come in. Has MD in the tasting been to Campbelltown? No, you've not lived until you've been to Campbelltown. You've got to come and see it. There's an older picture of Campbelltown. In this picture alone, there's actually about 6 different distilleries if you study it closely. You can see Springbank on the sort of left-hand side, and then there's Glen Nevis and a few others as well, like Long Road Distillery and stuff there as well. That's actually up the back of Springbank.
I imagine that there's some fairly nice bed and breakfast or Airbnb, VRBO, cute, quaint, historic places.
There is, yeah. There's quite a good variety. There's quite a lot of Airbnbs nowadays, but certainly there's a good few hotels, and yeah, there's a variety of different budgets because people do ask us, "Oh, where do you recommend staying?" And says, "Well, you don't know everybody's budget, so you just say, well, there's if you like whiskey, good food, there's a large Shield Hotel, there's a Craigard House, and there's a lot of sort of small sort of bed and breakfast and Airbnbs. So there's a good variety of accommodation to be had in Campbelltown, which is good. We actually set up the Explore Campbelltown website, and it's basically all the local sort of hotels and that are listed on this website just so we can say, people ask us, where do you recommend staying? So visit explorecampbelltown.com and all the hotels and that are listed there. So it's
That's excellent. Thank you.
We offer.
Is Springbank essentially the number one reason Campbelltown's still around? Like, are you guys carrying the town?
Yeah, the two sort of tourist attractions is whiskey and golf. So outside Campbelltown, out at Macpherson, there's a world famous golf course as well. But yeah, it's whiskey and golf. And certainly there's a lot of nice walks and stuff, good beaches and surfing. But the main tourist attractions is whiskey and golf.
Gotcha.
It's not the easiest place to get to. So, but yeah, people in the area, come down to Campbelltown. They also go over to Isla as well. So there's a kind of whiskey trail, we say, for the West Coast.
So I got to say, one of the reasons I found it hard to get into Springbank originally was that it's a little bit peated. There's some peat on this. Mm-hmm. Talk about the process of because you have right. My understanding of Springbank is there's 3 brands under the Springbank distillery, and Springbank's the middle, and then there's Longrow, which is peated, and Hazelburn is unpeated. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. So because we do everything on site, we can alter the production process at any stage. So yeah, when we're drying the barley, we can do no peat, a little peat, but more heavily peated for the different brands. And then the distillation process will be different as well, which I'll talk about in due course as well. Should be. So on to Springbank now. So yeah, Springbank founded in 1828. Our president is a great-great-grandson who is a chairman. So it's still in the same family as its original founders, as I say. And we're actually the only distillery in Scotland that we can say we do 100% of our production process on site at the distillery. We do everything from malting a barley right through to bottling. So it's but we keep our production relatively small, so we can do that. If we say our capacity is 750,000 litres of alcohol per year, but if we tried to produce that, we could probably have to buy in malted barley. We couldn't mature it all in Campbelltown. We'd have to bottle it elsewhere, etc. But we keep our production relatively small, so we can do everything 100%. Nowadays, we're up to about 260,000 litres of alcohol per year. Now, it's not a lot. If you compare that to, say, Kalila Distillery on Isla, I think last I heard they were about 4.2 million. Yes, we're only 250,000 litres. So very, very small amount. But we keep all that for ourselves. We do not sell for blending purposes. Back in 2001, we made the decision to stop selling cask to private individuals. So all Springbank we produce is kept for ourselves.
So you're saying that any independently bottled Springbank would have been purchased before 2001?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's the Chieftain's whiskey. Yeah, obviously it was bottled many years ago, but we stopped selling cask in 2001. So certainly there is still casks on the open market of Springbank, Longrow, etc. But yes, they would have been for before 2001.
So if I find it 2002, then it's contraband?
It's certainly, that it shouldn't happen. I think we officially stopped in 2001. I think I seen a 2002 single cask on the market. Like, how was that possible? And then Frank says he sold a couple in 2002, but officially 2001 is when we stopped selling cask to private individuals. But you'll not see any after that. Really.
Gotcha.
And it starts we've obviously got a lot of cask maturing still at the distillery owned by private individuals. We are actively trying to buy these casks back as well, which is because also we want the whiskey back. But it starts a bidding war, because we'll pay over the odds for the cask, but then independent bottlers might sort of start paying a bit more for it, and it starts, who's willing to pay the more money for it. So we'll pay over the odds, but we'll not pay silly money for these casks. But certainly be good for us to get them back in our, because we do have old stock, but we certainly would always like more of it. So this is up in the barley loft. So it's only Scottish grown barley we use at the distillery, but to this day we still buy some barley that was grown locally in the Campbelltown area. So about 25 tons of barley comes in from the local farmers every year for obviously the local barley expressions, which we'll try later on.
Grant, is that the drying floor where you're going to be, or is that just where you store it?
That's where we'll store the local barley. So if you take the barley straight off the fields, you've got to have a dormancy period before you can go into the malting process.
Right.
So there's usually about a 3 months dormancy period before you can go into the start of the steeping. So the local barley will come in, stored up in the barley loft for 3 months, and then it'll go into the steep. If we're buying the barley from the east coast of Scotland, they'll basically store it for us, and it'll come in, and we can straight into the steeping process. But the local barley certainly goes up to the barley loft for a few months.
And what does that smell like in there?
It's a lovely malty smell to it. It's just that freshly harvested barley. It's just a lovely sort of maltiness to it. Obviously, it's an old building, so there's a lot of dust up there, and it's on the top floor.
How high is that pile of malt?
Well, what you're seeing there is about 20 odd tons of barley. That's what we want to do now. You'll see in this little video so we want to start putting the barley into the steep. Now, Springbank, it is very, very labour intensive. A lot of work goes into making Springbank. So that's them pushing the barley.
Right? Oh, there you go.
There we go, a little hole in the floor. Putting it down the hole, and then I'll show you this one here. So putting into the steep, and that's basically a big sort of cast iron bathtub, and that'll hold about 10 or 12 tons of barley. All depends what malt floor we're going to use. They've got 2 malt floors. The bottom floor holds about 12 tons, and then the top floor holds about 10 tons. So we'll put in 10 or 12 tons of barley into the steep, and we want to get the water content up to about 48%. We do that by sort of soaking the barley in water for about 12 hours, drain it for about 12 hours, and then soak it again in water for another 14 hours, and that gets the water content up to about 48%. After done the steeping process, we've got to basically, as the water's been drained away, we've got to go inside and empty it all by hand.
Wow.
Not that fast, unfortunately. That is speeded up slightly.
Isn't there a machine that could do this for you? I mean, this just seems crazy.
It probably is, but this is a working museum. We're employing about 90 people within the company, and yes, so there's steps that we could put in modern methods, but what about these guys who have worked there for many years? We could do away with the malt floors and buy in barley already malted, but it's not part of Springbank. We want to make sure it's all done on site. So yes, it is very costly to make Springbank and very time consuming, but it is very important for us. And the great thing is we're responsible to one person. So it's not a case of the big shareholders, right? Where can we maximize profit? Where can we be more efficient? Yes, we could be more efficient by putting in modern equipment, but that is not what Springbank's all about.
the point is to keep doing it the way you've been doing it for so long and keep that tradition and, you know,
Exactly.
quality of life.
Yep. I mean, to give you an idea of time scale, it usually takes about 4 hours to empty the steep and lay it out on the malt floors. So it is very, very time consuming. So you see the steep in the background, and then there's usually sort of 3, sometimes they'll get some guys in from the yard and they'll lay it out on the malt floors, usually about 6 inches deep. And there's no artificial heat source on the malt floors. The only way we control the temperature is opening and closing the window shutters. You can see in the background there. So the optimum temperature for the germination process is about 16 degrees Celsius. And they'll turn barley on a regular basis throughout that time just to help the germination process. And little rootlets, little shoots will start growing from the barley, and you don't want that knitting together. So it's grubbed and raked and turned during the 5
What is
6
it like, Grant, you know, for those guys who are working in there? I mean, is it really hot or is it really humid? Is it?
No, I mean, certainly it's they'll do the malting process right throughout the year. If you came to Springbank approximately sort of 3 years ago, it was the same guys who moved with the process. We've done sort of 2 months malting and then 2 months distilling. The same guys move with the process, 2 months malting, 2 months distilling, 2 months malting, 2 months distilling. So they were back and forward. But because we wanted to up our production, we had to go down the route of basically doubling it because, yeah, full-time malts team, and we've got a full-time distillation team now as well. So yeah, sometimes we might be in here during the winter months and can be quite cold. What we do find is, like during the height of the summer, the germination process might only take about 5 days due to the hotter weather. But then during the winter months, it might be into that 7th day. So it's an average of 6 days, but it doesn't really get very humid in there at all. Obviously, it's a very old building, sort of stone built, so there's no heat source in there. But yeah, it's quite nice to work. Sometimes during the last couple of years, especially, it was actually getting too hot in the malt floors, and we actually had to put kind of ventilation fans in just to try and help cool it down a wee bit because the germination process was too fast, too hot. There's the grubber, and then we've got electric turner, and that's basically throwing the barley up in the air, so it stops it knitting together and expresses some of the heat out of the barley as well. And that's the grubber. So that's a plough-like system. It's a rake they're dragging through the barley, and then that's just turning it over again, sort of stop it knitting together. There's a little video there. That's the grubber working away there as well. What do you all think of the Springbank 10-year-old? Ideal. It's a cracking whiskey to start off with.
It was wonderful. Love the mouthfeel on it. Very smooth, very velvety.
So whiskey number 2 is the Springbank 15-year-old. So the difference with this one is it's fully matured 15 years in Oloroso sherry casks. Much darker, and even on the nose and in the palate, it's much heavier because of all the sherry cask influence to it. It's not too sweet, but there's certainly a lot of sweetness there to it, and nice sort of mouthfeel, a bit more body complexity to it. Obviously, that extra 5 years, a wee bit of maturity to it as well. Sometimes we've got a lot of dunnage warehouses at Springbank, and you get that damp, dirty, earthy note to it, and that's normal for Springbank, and especially of sherry cask influenced Springbank as well.
Is there a reason you go from the 10 to the 15 and the 46% range? Because usually there would be a 12 here in Springbank.
Yeah, so normally when I do tastings, I'm trying to think of what flavor profile works after. Because the 12-year-old is cask strength, we're doing that later on. Because even like the next whiskey we're going on to is the 18-year-old. People sometimes say, oh, why are you doing the 18 before a 12-year-old or before the local barley? In flavor profile, I think, to me, my personal opinion would be the 18-year-old works, the 10, 12, 18, and then go into a cask strength version as well. The cask strength as well, there's a variety of different cask types used for it. So it's big, it's bold, it's wonderful. So certainly, if you tried the cask strength now and then went on to the 15-year-old, because of the higher alcohol strength, you probably wouldn't get the flavors coming through of this 15-year-old.
I meant as a brand. Is there a 12-year at 46%, or do you go 10, 46?
No. But yeah,
why that decision as a brand to do that, to skip the 12 there?
I mean, for those who are, I know the old school Springbanks, we used to do the 100 proof Springbank years ago. It was a 10-year-old 100 proof, and it was very, very popular. And we sort of just changed it to basically a 12-year-old version. So it used to be a 12-year-old 100 proof, but then just to change it slightly, we start bottling it at cask strength. So instead of doing 100 proof every bottling, we changed it so it varies every year for the cask strength. And yeah, it's just because of popularity, everybody loves, and it gives the drinker the option of adding some water. So yeah, our 46 range is what we do, but then a few other products will be at cask strength, and that's just giving you the drinker the option of playing about with adding water or not. For my preference, I wouldn't add water to any of the whiskies we're trying tonight, but yeah, some people want to experiment, adding a wee dash of water here and there. So doing it at cask strength just gives that option. And sometimes I think as well that you get more of the distillery influence coming through at natural cask strength as well. So it's interesting to see it compare a 46% against the cask strength as well. So
maybe it's because I've finally had a splash of whiskey on my palate, but it seems that the 15 has a lot less peat to it than the 10 did.
What I find is lots of more bourbon matured whiskies, especially in the Springbank range, bring out a bit more of the peat. Like, because of this one's quite a lot of sherry cask influence, it's masking some of the peat smoke. So yeah, you're just getting that sort of dark raisins, sort of Christmas cake as we call it over here. So then he's got that dark, fruity, nutty influence to it, the sherry cask influence. So you're not really getting some of the peat smoke influence coming through. I mean, obviously it's very subtly peated anyway. Because this is what I'm going to talk about now is, so obviously let's transfer the barley from the malt floors inside the kiln. So above this fire, there's a metal mesh. So we put that 10 or 12 tons of barley onto this metal mesh, and then we want to dry it off. So we want to stop the germination process, and we do that by basically putting it below a heat source. So Hazelburn, we do not use peat at all. So it's a hot air machine, it's a big industrial hairdryer that's blowing hot air up through the barley, drying it off and stopping that germination process. So that's unpeated. And it comes to our Springbank, we do 6 hours peat smoke and then a further 30 hours using the hot air machine. So it's lightly peated, and that comes in about 12 to 15 parts per million. And then for long row, it's about 48 hours using peat smoke only, and that comes in about 45 to 50 parts per million. So that's the 3 different styles we produce for the Springbank range.
Well, you're using the same stills for all 3, right?
Using all the same stills, but we'll change the distillation process because one's triple, one's 2.5, and one's double distilled, which I'll talk about later on. But yeah, the distillation process is different for all 3 of them.
But if you
that's a pile of peat sitting next to the furnace.
Yes, that is indeed. So what we'll do, we'll get the kiln lit using dry peat, and then we will shovel on wet, damp peat. That is peat as well. That's what we'll get the kiln lit, and then we'll start shoveling on this. And because you don't want to generate too much heat, so you don't want too much flame coming through. Because quicker you dry off the barley, you're not going to infuse the peat smoke influence. So you want to basically the peat reek, the peat smoke traveling up through the barley and drying off to infuse all the peat smoke. And just, yeah, more wet, damp peat you use will generate more smoke. So that's inside the kiln. So after the kiln's been lit and it's cooled down, the guys have got to go inside and empty it all by hand. So what to do is shovel the barley into this bit, malted barley into the corner, and they use an auger system, a corkscrew system that'll take up the barley and put it onto a conveyor belt that'll take it into one of the malt bins. And you see you've got 10 malt bins.
Why did they have the hazmat suits on? Just for the dust?
It's just for the dust. Yeah, it's just for dust wise. That's all it is. It is quite a dusty, because you're drying it off, and a lot of the little rootlets are kind of start breaking off. So if you start shoveling it and you're using the auger system, there's a lot of dust in the air, so you don't want to breathe that in. So yeah, we've got the chemical suits, as we call it, on. So we've got 10 malt bins. Each bin holds 20 tons of barley. Basically, 2 malt floors fit perfectly into one bin. After it's been through the kiln, you've lost a couple of ton in weight. So 2 malt floors fit into one bin. And so earlier on, I was telling you the normal cycle at Springbank used to be 2 months malting. The reason behind that was it took us 2 months to fill the 10 bins, and then approximately 2 months to empty them. And that's what the cycle was going back about 3 years ago. Because we wanted the upper production, we went down the route of getting a full-time malts team in, and now we're distilling 7 months at Springbank, and then the same stillman move up to Glengyle Distillery for 3 months of the year. So I actually moved up to Glengyle a couple of weeks ago. So usually the last 3 months of the year, we are distilling up at Glengyle. Hope you enjoyed the 15-year-olds, beautiful dram. If I'm going too fast for the dram wise, just tell me to slow down. I'm just saying, quite conscious, I've got 9 whiskies to try.
Oh, no, you're good. We most people that come to these tastings by now know to bring a glass for each pour, so we can revisit, go back and forth. So we're good to go. This one was really, really good, and yeah, very good mouthfeel, very good depth of flavor.
There is, and it's a big difference, you know. You think some people think like the 15-year-old will just be 10 years, matured on for another 5 years, because it's got that more kind of sherry cask influence, a total different mouthfeel to it, it's a different market to it, and yeah, I mean, certainly both cracking drams. But what we're trying to do with the Springbank range is cater for everybody's palate, because at trade shows people come up and say, "Oh, I've not tried Springbank before," and I'm like, "Oh, what do you normally drink?" And some people say a few different distilleries. I'm like, right, so that may be more your style, because if you like something that's a bit more sherry cask influence, yes, it's the 15-year-old. But if you like something that's a bit more bourbon, it might be the Springbank. But we'll also do the Hazelburn 10-year-old, which is fully matured in bourbon casks. So you can get a whiskey for everybody out the Springbank range, including the Hazelburn and the Long Row for the peaty monsters. So moving on to the Springbank 18-year-old. So it's a limited bottling of the Springbank 18. So it's only bottled once a year. Only a small amount of Springbank 18 is bottled. And that's one of the reasons why you probably find it's quite hard to get. And every year there's also going to be a slight variation in the cask makeup. That's one of the reasons why I did ask you to look out the bottling date. Because the Springbank we're trying was bottled in November 2020, and that year's expression was 45% bourbon and 55% sherry cask makeup. This year we just released another Springbank 18-year-old, and it was quite similar to this one. It was 50% bourbon and 50% sherry, but going back about 4 years ago, I think 4 years ago now, there was a Springbank 18-year-old fully matured in bourbon casks. So we do little product sheets so people can ask us and we'll give them that information, because certainly we don't put it on the label, but certainly people are nice to, want to know the cask makeup, and yeah, we're quite open to tell them. So if people can give us the operation number, in the back of the label there's a little, not see it in this computer unfortunately, there's a little number with the bottling date or operation number, so we can sort of trace that back to all the casks that were used, and we can say, yep, that was X bourbon and so many sherry casks used and stuff like that. So yeah, this one here is 45% bourbon and 55% sherry casks.
I think Springbank is one of those brands leading the way for transparency, where you'll tell everyone. I know of plenty of brands that have that do like a marriage of ex bourbon and ex sherry, but they don't tell people what the percentage is, and it's like, I'm not gonna replicate it. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
But that's a company secret. Versus
Yeah,
you guys are like, well,
definitely.
we got this over here.
Yeah, so for us as well, we are going down the route of a bit more sort of cask management. So for years, or even just now, we are looking at the portfolio. Okay, how many casks we've got that's sitting around about 18-year-old? How many casks of bourbon? How many casks of sherry? What can we do for the Springbank 18-year-old? And sometimes, yeah, 1 year it was all bourbon, because all the whiskey we had that was 18 years old was fully matured in bourbon casks. We might have not bought any sherry casks in that year, back about 18 years ago. So, but nowadays there's a bit more cask management. So I'm trying to make sure we're buying in the same sort of cask every year of bourbon and sherry. So every year we're filling roughly the same numbers. So in years to come, our Springbank 18-year-old might be a bit more controlled. We might get an influence to it. We want it a mixture of bourbon and sherry, so it might go down the route of, say, 70% sherry, 30% bourbon. So but we can do that now, but we've started doing a bit more cask management at New Make Spirit, so it'll help us in years to come. Because like I said, the Springbank 10-year-old is set in place with a 60-40 mixture, and the Springbank 15-year-old is all sherry. So these two are kind of set in stone, so we want to continue on, and we've got a database in that there, the older stock, a bit more manageable as well. So,
are you using always the same kind of sherry?
Yeah, it's sort of, yeah, it's we've got a great rapport with sort of sherry providers, and it's mostly all the Rosso sherry casks we use. If we mature in other sherry casks, we usually keep them separate. I might do like maybe a Springbank Society bottling or sort of another limited release. In a year and a half time, we're actually going to start doing a sherry series of Amontillado, Fino, Manzanella, PX stuff. So it's a kind of 6-year series of different sherry types, and it's something to look forward to as well. So we always like to try, and so we've tried them recently. Obviously the PX is like drinking Coca-Cola. It's very, very dark, but lots of sherry influence to it. So it's quite interesting. So they'll all, when we put they're not all full maturation. So likes of, I'm not sure the exact ages here, but we might have put a 6-year-old whiskey into the PX, or probably an 8-year-old into the PX. It's good plan to leave it for maybe a year, 2 years, and then that'll be the kind of first one bottled, because obviously we don't want it too long in the PX. It'll just give too much influence. But you'll notice we're trying the Springbank 18-year-old, much more body and depth to it, and you can see why we're going from 10 to 15 to the 18. But actually, even though it's a mixture of bourbon and sherry, I feel in this one here there's a bit more the sherry influence coming through. So it's got a lot more kind of first fill sherry cask used.
And you're always getting real sherry casks, or are you having companies season casks for you in sherry?
It's always it's real season, real sherry casks we're
Wow.
buying in. Yeah. So yeah, that's one thing. Because the production we do, the sherry casks we buy in are they're shipped over whole, so they're not broken down at all. They're shipped over from Spain whole, which works perfect for us and a bit more manageable as well. So it is more costly to do it that way, but we feel it's much more beneficial. Because roughly we'll pay maybe say £100 for an empty bourbon barrel. Sometimes we might pay up to sort of £800 for an empty sherry butt. So there's a huge cost difference. Also the big size difference, but yeah, huge cost in buying the sherry casks. I see somebody's comment there. Yeah, the Springbank 18 is much more complex, a lot more body and bite to it as well. So we want to go into the milling stage. So the malted barley that's been stored in the malt bins is now want to grind it into grist. So inside the mill, there's 3 sets of rollers, and we want to basically grind it, so break up the husk of the barley so we can extract the sugars at the next stage. So the barley is transferred along a conveyor belt up to the 3rd floor. It's dropped through what we call a de-stoner. It basically takes all the stones, all the mice, etc. So only malted barley is getting dropped through the mill. Just a quick video there. That just shows you, so it's not a constant feed of barley or malted barley that's going through the mill. It kind of works the laser, the weighing device there. So it fills up to a certain weight and then it drops it through the mill. So it's not a constant. It's just every so often a bucket drops through the mill. But you can see it's the age of it. It's very, very old. That mill is approximately, I think it's about 80 years old now. And it's driven off of one motor, and there's about, I think, 9 or 10 different belts driven off of one motor doing all the work. Again, a lot of people say you could do a bit more modern methods, but great philosophy at Springbank: if it's not broken, don't fix it. You know, that mill's going strong, very, very rarely breaks down, very easily stripped down and rebuilt and recalibrated. I love that 18 years. The next whiskey is the Springbank Local Barley. Unfortunately, I don't have that one here at my house. So I'll just sort of describe it. You can talk amongst yourself. The Springbank 10-year-old Local Barley, 56.2% alcohol is the next whiskey we're going to try. And this is the 5th bottling of the Local Barley series we started again. So we actually have done one after this. There has been a 6th, and number 7 is due out in February next year. So this is the 5th release, and it was grown from High Catadale Farm just outside Campbelltown towards Southend, and the barley type was Optic, and there was 9,000 bottles of this Local Barley, and the maturation was 77% bourbon, 20% sherry, and 3% port cask used for this release. So yeah, cask strength was the first cask strength whiskey we're going to try of the evening. 56.2, as I say. Now, I prefer it without water, but it's up to yourself if you want to experiment and add a little drop of water. If not, the Local Barley series, for those who know the old Springbank range, Springbank was very famous for the 65 and 66 Local Barleys, and something we wanted to recreate. So going back about 22 odd years ago, we started asking local farmers to see if they would grow barley for us again, and yeah, a few of them did. So every year we'll say we'll get about 20 odd tons of barley in from local farmers, and we'll keep that totally different. Now we'll actually leave it to the farmer to pick the barley variety. So sometimes it might come in being optic, beer barley, and so forth. And people do ask, does barley strain have influence? And we feel doing the local barley series, you can tell the difference of the different barley varieties, which is interesting. It's quite, best way to describe the local barley series, it's much a cleaner, fresher spirit to it. And certainly this one here, with a mixture of the bourbon, sherry and port, with a nice sort of balance to it as well. But yeah, nice sort of cleaner, fresher Springbank. Okay, it's only 10 years old, but the big bold bodiness to it is fantastic.
I was really impressed with how kind of the sweetness and how it on the front of palate, the taste was very it I couldn't taste the alcohol, the proof of it.
You don't.
It was towards the finish, but it was. I was two sips. I was just like, wait, is this that sweet and kind of luscious on the beginning? And yeah, it is. So really impressed.
Yep, that's one of the things we always say, because I love cask strength Springbank, and generally feeling you're kind of, what strength is this? You're waiting for that alcohol bite, and it's not there. It's very, very smooth in the palate. All the Springbanks say, even at cask strength, I've not found one that's been very, very harsh or spirity over my time. Yes, you might get something a bit more mouthfeel to it, but yeah, they're very, very palatable. For this one here is only 56.2, but yeah, it's something you're not looking at. Where's my water? No. It's not asking to add water to it.
No, even when it's on it's after I've swallowed and it's kind of on the finish, and then you kind of get that. Your mind is like, okay, there's where the heat is, but it's very muted. It's not like you said. You said you put it really well. You're not trying to grab your water to kind of put out the fire.
It works really well, and that's one of the reasons why we keep on doing like the cask strengths and our limited releases at cask strengths, because we feel they work really well. I mean, certainly it would be better for us to reduce it to 46. We can get a few more bottles out of it, but it's doing it cask strengths, and it's just giving the drinker that bit more options there to try something a bit more higher strength alcohol, and the flavour profile of it works sometimes at cask strength as well. There's a huge collector's base between our limited releases as well. I'm not sure what it's like over with yourselves, but certainly like so this one here, okay, when it first came on the market, it was about £100. Within 6 months at auction sites, selling double the value, if not up to sort of £300 quite easily within sort of 6 months. Just because it's got all the information on the label, when it was distilled, when it was bottled, how many bottles were produced, the barley strain. It's something that appeals to the collectors, but when we're always saying that Springbank's there for drinking, enjoying, but certainly there is ones who, because of the demand there, they try and get the whiskey and try and make the fast buck on it, shall we say.
And Vadim, how did you source this particular one?
So I have a very complicated system. I call Qua and I say, Qua, I need Springbank. And he says, okay, I have these bottles. And that's how I source these.
Wow, thank you. That is exceptional.
I haven't poured it yet because but it smells like almond cookies. Those like, you go to a buffet and get the Chinese like almond cookies with like a sliver of almond on top, and they're like sweet, and that's exactly what it smells like.
This is
so
really
good.
Impressive. So this tenure is basically the local barley is only on secondary. We're not going to see it on shelves, and it's in people's collections because it's completely sold out. And are you making it again? Are you continuing to?
So yeah, every year we'll do we'll distill what we can of 22 tons of barley. So there's a small amount produced every year. The local barley series we bottle, it's not always going to be a 10-year-old. When we started doing this series, the first release going back 6-7 years ago was a 16-year-old. And then there's been a few different 10-year-olds. There's been a 9-year-old. The next one is in fact going to be another 10-year-old. And we've got quite a few different ones maturing away. So we'd say we're doing it every year. So it's around about 10 years old. We'll do the local barley series as a kind of age. It's working well for us. And side by side comparison with the Springbank 10-year-old, the first one, there's such a difference. And see, there is that lighter style to the local barley. It's a cleaner, fresher sort of spirit. So even sometimes the listen here is it's got similar. Okay, it's got a wee bit of port influence to it, but it's got mostly bourbon, a wee bit of sherry, like so our core Springbank 10-year-old. But side by side, they're totally different. And that's one thing we say, like, well, what's different about it? I say, well, apart from it being at cast strength, okay, this one here's got a lot of port in it, but the barley type is different. What we do find with the local barley series is we're not getting the volume. On average, we'll get, you talk about, geez, about 400 litres per tonne of malt. It's what the kind of what distilleries in Scotland work off. For the East Coast barley, we work off about 406 litres per tonne of malted barley. But the local barley, we're only getting about 392, something like that. So we're not getting the volume, but the quality's there. So it's certainly worthwhile.
Most all the same? Is the distillation on the local barley the same as others? It's double distilled?
It's 2.5 times distilled. So yeah. So it's all Springbank we're trying tonight. So all the whiskies are distilled the same way 2.5 times. I'll talk about that 2.5 times later on, but yeah, it's all distilled the same way. So it's on the malt floor is the same. The difference is it's this local barley as well. It's like a smaller grain, so we have to adjust the mill accordingly, so to get the grist to the right consistency. In the washbacks, it's the same ratio between the wort and yeast. So it's usually about 21,000 litres of wort to 75 kilograms of yeast. That's the same throughout the whole Springbank range. So yeah, it is really all down to the barley strain. So what I want to do now is take the barley, malted barley has been through the mill, and put it into the mash tun. So we put about 3.5 tons of grist into the mash tun, and then we put 4 lots of hot water through that, and so we can extract all the sugars from it. This mash tun is over 100 years old, and it's called basically it's a rack and pinion. So the turning gear inside it's a kind of old-fashioned rack and pinion. Hear the sillies talk about the lauter or semi-lauter or fully lauter mash tuns that are stainless steel, sort of, nice and shiny, obviously more heat efficient, more cost effective. But to this, it's still going strong. Why replace it? So that's adding water to it. So let's see. You see the kind of rack and put not a very clear picture on this one, but that's the filling it up. And you see the turning gear, the center of the mash tun. There's that rack and pinion turning gear, and it turned the paddles. So mixing the wort in with the barley. Now see the smell off of this. It's just lovely malty cereal notes to it. It's very, very sweet and sugary as well. There's a better photograph. So because they put 4 lots of hot water in it, so mix it about for a wee while and then drain it away, and that's basically extracting all the sugars from it, and that's the wort that gets pumped up into the washbacks. This is a wee video of behind the scenes.
And Grant, are you just using local water?
Yeah, local water, yeah. Same water source right through from the start to finish. Yeah, there's a purpose-built loch called Crosshill Loch, and we to this day still get our water source from it. So it's the same water used right through the whole distillery process.
And Stuart is the distillery manager, or who Stuart is?
That Stuart's just one of the Stillman's actually now retired. This was filmed about a year ago. I was with the masks on, our face covering, but he now retired. So the distillery manager, well, he's director of production. It's Finlay Ross is our director of production. So he's in charge of all the production wise. And we've also got Gavin McLaughlin, who is works close by. So number 5 is the Springbank 12-year-old cask strength at 56.1% alcohol. So this one here was bottled in October 2020, and it was the 21st bottling. So the cask strengths, we do 2 bottlings per year. And so, yeah, this is the 21st batch. A lot of collectors and the people who big into the Springbanks, well, what batch of Springbank 12-year-old cask strength is this? So this is batch 21. And usually about 9,000 to sometimes up to 11,000 bottles of the cask strength. As we do it twice a year, and usually comes out in around about August, or February and August every year. But this year, in fact, there's actually going to be 1 release of it. The reason behind that is around about 12 years ago, we cut back our production during the recession when the price of oil and barley went too high. So we cut back our production. So we've got very little whiskey that is maturing at 12 years old. So there's only going to be 1 release of the 12-year-old cask strength this year. This one here, the cask makeup for this one is 45% sherry, 25% bourbon, and 5% burgundy. So just again, we always do vary the cask strengths every year just to, again, keep people interested. It's quite nice to try with different cask types. You know, people are like, oh, there's burgundy cask, red wine cask in it. Is there any red wine influence coming through on the nose or the palate? Now I've said it, you're probably like, yes, there is a red wine fruitiness there to it, but certainly if I told you, didn't tell you, you probably would think there is a wee sort of fruity red wine sort of tannin note to it. But even this one here, there is a bit more body to it, and so you say, oh yes, that is cask strength, but there's still not any harsh acidity. You know, it's stronger, but it's not harsh acidity whatsoever. But the mouthfeel on it, it's like, it's sweet. There's, you know, that red wine fruitiness to it, and yeah, and that kind of bourbon vanilla notes to it. So it's all working really well together. Some people think when you're doing a variety of different cask types, they do they work well together? Are they going to fight one another? You know, is it bourbon I'm drinking? Is it red wine? But yeah, it works really well together, and it just completes that nicer complexity to it, and it just keeps on developing on the nose and the palate. That was one of my favourite cask strengths over the last few years. Just the body and mouthfeel to it is fantastic.
And Grant, on that one, What was the breakdown again on the sherry, bourbon, and burgundy?
So 45% sherry, 25% bourbon, and 5% burgundy. Oh,
Thank you.
again, I missed one out there. It was there was a 45% sherry, 25% bourbon, 25% burgundy, and 5% port. I do apologize, there's port cast in that as well. 5% port instead of burgundy. It's 25% burgundy and 5% port.
There we go. My math wasn't adding up, but it's like something's missing.
Something's missing. Yes, it is indeed. Yes, 45 sherry, 25 bourbon, 25 burgundy, and 5% port.
I love that you mentioned the the burgundy in there and how that red wine finish comes out. You definitely, as soon as you said that, it was the immediate like, oh yeah, it's there for sure.
It's that's one thing when we're doing the tasting notes. We don't usually look at the cask makeup. We usually get that information just after we do the tasting notes. Just if we've got in our head, yes, there's a red wine cask in there, or you start looking for the fruity red wine notes. So we try and do it sort of blind of what the cask makeup is, and then we think, yeah, try and get a true feeling of it, and then okay, look at the cask makeup. Oh, yeah, there is red wine in that, so you get that red wine tannins coming through, or the fruity notes. So
yeah, the burgundy like jumped out at me like right away on the first sip, and I was like, "There's no way this is only 5%."
25%. I do apologize.
That makes much more sense.
And Grant, and so from year to year, that's going to be different though, just depending upon what you guys have on hand. And that 12-year cask strength is going to be different every year.
And that's people they love that fact. For a good number of years, we used to always think we'll go down the route of 70% sherry, 30% bourbon. For a good number of years, that was the makeup for the 12-year cask strength. But over the last 5 years, it certainly has varied. The one that's just come out is 100% bourbon casks. So the one that's just been released, which it's probably on its way to America. Not sure when it'll arrive yourselves. I think it left, or was going to leave certainly this week. But certainly, yeah, that's 100% bourbon casks is the latest bottling of it.
So one other question is, so what the one that we're drinking right now, what year was that again?
So that was bottled in October 2020.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, that's one thing as well. Obviously the strength changes every year because it's natural cask strength. So people think, oh, the 56.1%, that's the one with the burgundy and port. Wow, the flavor profile was that one. Or this one, it just came out. I think it's 56.9% alcohol, and it's 100% bourbon cask. So yeah, people start talking about that bottling as well. So there's a whiskey database that basically lists all the Springbank bottlings and the release dates and stuff, and number of bottles produced. It's quite a good website for a bit more information if you're looking for, when was that bottled. It's all on this whiskey base website. So we've got 6 washbacks, and this is where we want to start the fermentation process. So these washbacks hold about 25,000 litres. So we only put in about 21,000 litres of wort, that's sugary water solution, and then 75 kilograms of distiller's yeast, and that converts the sugars into alcohol. Now we do a very long fermentation process. It's up to 110 hours in the washbacks, and we feel a longer fermentation results in a fruitier style of spirit. So it works for us and what we're trying to produce. It's about 5% alcohol after the 110 hours, and then that is the wort that goes to the stills. Made from boat skin larch. So nowadays, most distillers will use stainless steel, a bit more sort of hygienically clean and clinical, but the old materials is wood, and it's larch wood. So we'll continue on using the wooden washbacks. We feel it's got a important factor in the fermentation process. So that's one of the reasons why we continue on doing it.
Hi, Grant.
No.
Does Springbank experiment with different kinds of yeast, or is it always the same distiller's yeast?
It's always been the same yeast. Very good question. Yeah, because a lot of distilleries are experimenting using liquid form yeast and different sort of hybrids of yeast. But yeah, it's always M strain distillers yeast we've used, a solid yeast. We've always used the same yeast. It's something I've never. We'd sometimes like to experiment in different ways, but the fermentation is one. We actually keep the fermentation process the same for Hazelburn, Springbank, and Long Row. So that's why we could sort of, because sometimes people say that the Long Row, it's not as heavily peated as some of the Islay whiskies, but you're saying it's 45 to 50 parts per million in the malted barley as well. What we're now hearing that because we do a long fermentation, it's losing some of the phenols in that fermentation process. It's something we do keep the same for the three. So coming to the distillation process, so this is going to be the second difference between the three styles we produce. So you can see we've got three stills. For Hazelburn, we put the wash from the washbacks into the first still, distill it, into the second stills, and then into your third. So it's 3 times or triple distilled for Hazelburn. And that first came about back in 1997. Back then it was Frank McCarty was our distillery manager. He actually worked at Springbank for a number of years, then he left to go to the Bushmills in Northern Ireland, worked at Bushmills for about 10 years, and then he came back to Springbank in 97 and says, why don't we do an Irish or lowland style of triple distillation, and hence where the Hazelburn range came from. For Long Row, it is only double distilled. So we don't use the third still for Long Row. It's only the wash still and the first spirit still, the one in the middle there, that is used for Long Row. Now, double distillation, it produces a more heavier, sort of dense, robust style to it, and that sort of suits the Long Row characteristics. It's a bit more sort of body and that to it. And then for Springbank, it is 2.5 times distilled. So what we do here is take the wash from the washbacks, put it into the wash still. And the first time you heat up that liquid, it's your low wines that's coming off. What we do is take some of your low wines and distill that again in your second still, and you get your faints coming off. What we do then is take 80% faints, 20% low wines, mix that together and put that into your third still and take the middle cut from that. So middle cut is, some of it's been distilled 3 times, some of it's only distilled twice, hence 2.5 times distilled, or a partial triple distillation. So that's what Springbank is very famous for. It's something we've always done. The chairman is in his late 80s, and he's always done this way. He knows his father and grandfather's always done the 2.5 time distillation. So it's something we continue on doing it. And people do ask, is there a reason behind it? And it was just what we say is he was experimenting to see what he wanted to create, what style of spirit, because there is a difference between double distillation, triple distillation. So he wanted something a bit in between, and that's where he came up with this 2.5 times of mixing your low wines and your faints together. Now our wash still is very unique. In fact, it's got 2 different types of heat source. So actually in the 60s, or before the 60s, prior to the 60s, it was a coal fire that was in the bottom of the still. So it was basically a direct flame heating source under the stills. And in the 60s, it was converted to an oil burner, but we've also got steam coils inside it as well. So it's got 2 different heating sources for that. And then the spirit stills have got steam coils inside.
Grant, I had a question about the 20% low wines that you guys mix. For scotches, is that normal to mix it in that kind of percentage, or is that something unique?
It's unique for Springbank. Yeah, so normally what you'll do is, take your low wines, distill that and get your faints, and then sort of get your middle cuts and stuff like that. But us mixing the low wines and your faints together is very unique for Springbank. It's something that's not done.
Thank you, because I not recalled hearing anybody do that. So I would just kind of maybe something just happened behind the scenes and they just didn't talk about. But thank you for sharing it. I had no idea.
No, it's good. Because even like so, like well, we say that Hazelburn is triple distilled, but like so Auchentoshan talk about they take cuts at every distillation, whereas we only take the middle cut on the third distillation for Hazelburn. So that's something slightly different as well. So there is different distilleries will take different approaches to the distillation. But for us, for the Springbank, it's a mixture of 20% against the 80% low wines in your faints.
So you're on your third distillation. You're just taking the hearts out, and what are you doing with your heads and your tails?
They'll go the heads and tails will go back in. So that's some of it. You're always doing that anyway, but certainly, generally speaking, you're taking your heart from that third distillation. The heads and tails will go back in for getting redistilled. And you see the age, but unfortunately, we don't know the exact age of the wash still, but it's that old. It's got rivets. It's riveted together rather than nice clean welds you see nowadays. Okay, so moving on to whiskey number 6. I don't have this one here, but this is a 12-year-old and it's from fresh Burgundy casks. So full 12 years in the Burgundy red wine and 53.5% alcohol. And for this one here, it's a limited edition, 10,260 bottles from that limited edition cask. Straight away you'll get the red wine fruitiness to it, and on the palate they get the nice sort of tannins that coming through, sort of kind of wine gums and stuff. Even the Springbank influence, I can remember this one. This one was bottled in 2016, if I remember correctly, and certainly you get the Springbank characteristics. So you get that damp, dungy, sort of wet, earthy note to it, but the red wine influence works really well, and it complements one another, because it's not just another whiskey matured in red wine, and you're losing the Springbank characteristics. It's both work really well together.
And David, if you're curious of the awesome place that procured this bottle, I can give you one hint.
Qua.
Correct. Poor guy's been collecting Springbank for years, and then we do one tasting.
It's a good thing that he's been collecting Springbank for years, but he's willing to open the bottles and let people try them. That's what I love to hear. There's so many people will collect Springbank and just look at the bottles on the shelf. But that's what I've been doing a lot of over the last year and a half, is people sitting there and opening up their collections. They phone me up and says, "Oh, can you do a tasting?" It's basically, I've been collecting Springbank, but my vision was always to do a tasting with them. It wasn't to make money or anything or for his pension. It was to someday open them and do tastings. And so I've been privileged enough to try a variety of old whiskies in the Springbank range, which has been fantastic. And I get sent a wee tasting pack as well, and it's nice to go back and try all these old Springbanks and stuff. So
no, we appreciate it. Well, thank you very much for sacrificing a component of your collection to our benefit, because it has been really fantastic. And Vadim, when are you going to do your polls? Because I sense there's going to be at least 2 or 3 polls.
I can. I feel like we should do one.
At least 2.
Yeah, we should definitely do the 46ers separate, because I'll throw some polls out for sure.
It's interesting to see, because obviously all the whiskey we're trying tonight is all Springbank, but they're all noticeably different, and that's the great thing about the Springbank range. It's like, and to pick a winner would probably be quite hard out of all these whiskies. I don't think there'll be okay, there might be one outright winner, but there'll be, there's some people just love the Springbank 10-year-old. Somebody might love this Burgundy when we're trying just now. And that's the great thing about the range. It's such a variety and sort of diversity of different products we do. There's another picture of the stills. And then that was a few years ago.
Well, the unfortunate thing about the downloading presentation icon in the middle of the screen is that we couldn't see the line arms, because I guess the line arms are basically just
Okay.
Yeah, you can
Slightly downward angle.
Okay, and they're all basically the same.
Yeah, they're all got a slight downward angle to them. And that's because that's one of the things, the angle line arm, and it makes a huge difference. If you've got the line arm sort of slightly upward, the reflex falls back into the stills, so redistilling itself. Yeah, the Springbanks have got a slight downward angle to them.
And is that the middle and the right stills, those yellow, the yellow metal that's under there that they're probably resting on? Is that where the heat source is?
So back in the day, it was all coal fires, but in the 60s when we ripped out the coal fires, so it's just steam coils. It's inside the two spirit stills, and then you've got an oil burner and steam coils inside. So I'll go into that one just now. So the coil there, that's the steam coil. See it in that picture there, and you also see a chain system. Hopefully you can see it that's what we call a rummager. And that's because we've got this is inside the wash still, and having a direct flame heating source underneath, you've got to have a rummager, a chain system scraping away at the bottom to make sure it doesn't stick. So that's inside the still. So that's your, also you can see the difference with two. You get a direct flame heating source and then the steam coils. The two spirit stills have got the steam coils.
Well, you can see where the chain has definitely kept the copper clean.
Yep. Yeah, big difference. Then having the rummager, we have this. So yeah, that is connected to the rummager. So one rotation of the chain at the bottom of the still, that bell will chime. So the stillman knows the rummager is working away, doing its job. So if you come in, see a tour Springbank, and you hear that little bell chiming in the background, that's what it is for. Old school technology. We don't need a computer to tell us it's working. We just stick a bell to it. Same idea. When we're pumping away the wort from the mash tun, it goes into a tank, and the measuring device inside it, it's a float connected to a bit of string with a stone tied to the end of it. So as the float rises with the liquid going up, the weight comes down, so we know when the tank's full. We could put in an electric gauge telling us how many litres it is. No, we've got a float with a string and a bit of stone.
I love how high tech you guys are.
Old school whiskey making. Yes.
Hi Grant, what kind of condenser do you use to cool the spirits down?
Well done. I knew I jumped that one there. Well done. So the condensers. So we've got two different types of condensers. So this is around the back of the still house, and the wash still is a shell and tube condenser. The first spirit still has got a worm tub, and then the third still has got another shell and tube. So we've got two types of condensers at Springbank, which is very unusual as well. And that's one thing when we do the long-roll range, because it's just getting used for the worm tub. It produces a kind of heavier style of spirit with the cooling of the alcohol vapors. Yeah, I've got two different types of condensers. This is the Spirit Safe, and this is again going to be a slight different because we do different distillation process. The middle cut is slightly different. So the stillman can obviously monitor everything that's coming through off the stills, and he'll check the density of the spirit and temperature, so he can check the alcohol strength. So like for Springbank, the middle cut is 76 down to 60. Long row is 69% alcohol down to 58% alcohol. Hazelburn, because it's triple distilled, the middle cut starts from 79 down to 63% alcohol. So that's the different cuts for the three spirits we produce. 80% of our production goes towards Springbank, 10% for Long Row, and 10% for Hazelburn.
Which expression are we on right now?
So we've just tried the Burgundy, and we're now going to move on to the Springbank 17-year-old Madeira.
I've been waiting for this one.
This is a nice, well, they've all been good. But this is certainly, I remember this one big time. It's good.
Every single one has been fantastic, but just the group knows I have a quiet love for any whiskey in Madeira casks. For some reason, that just goes well for me. So I've been excited to try this one.
So this one, a lot of people think it's 17 years in the Madeira. It's not, unfortunately. So it's 14 years in bourbon and rum casks, and then 3 years in the fresh Madeira casks.
Bourbon and rum, interesting. And at 47.8, is that cask strength or was that diluted?
That is cask strength, yep. So that is natural cask strength, 47.8.
A lot of evaporation on that one.
Yeah, and you know, we do sometimes notice that with some of the Springbank range. You know, some are higher evaporation and strengths than others, and there's not really a reason behind it. We just, you know, they're all matured in Camelton. Okay, there's a variety of different cask types used, but generally what we find, some might remember we done a Rundlets and Kilderkin series of small casks. They were very high losses in percent alcohol and volume as well, but the whiskey was fantastic. But this one here was a 47.8% alcohol after 17 years, which is lower than normal. But this one here, again, it's got a lovely sort of sweet and jammy note to it.
It looks like normally your cask strengths are around 55. What strength do you barrel at?
62.5% alcohol.
Do you go into the barrel at 62.5?
Yeah, we do. So yeah, all the casks are filled at the same strengths. We've done a triple distill called Cairn back in 2006. We filled some of the casks higher just for a wee experiment. But generally speaking, all our casks are at 62.5.
This is really nice.
It is one you want to sit back and take your time with. There's so much on the nose and on the palate. You just want to sit back and just basically savor it all. Again, very, very smooth. You know, it's just, but it's so Moorish. But lovely, sweet, jammy note to it. And, you know, that bourbon, the rum, and then the Madeira sweetness, it all works really well together.
You could say that about any of these expressions. I just want to sit down and think about it.
It's sometimes, you know, that's one of the things with some of the tasting we do. You want to sit back and just enjoy the dram and sip away at it, because sometimes it does. So Springbanks do need to time in the glass and to sort of breathe and to sort of a bit of air about them. You know, and even then on the palate, it changes from sip to sip, and it keeps on developing. And writing the tasting notes, sometimes we always go back to them as well when we're doing the tasting notes, because it just changes in the glass. And it's a weird and wonderful thing for whiskey in general, but certainly Springbank. Yeah, in the filling store, so all the casks are filled by hand. What we'll do, we've still got the old-fashioned weighing device, so weigh an empty cask, fill it up, and then they'll work out the weight difference so you can see the contents. There is a little gauge system as well that tells us how many litres we're putting in, but we still use the weighing device to this day. So every cask will have a unique number. So this cask here is from 1996. It's cask number 470, and there was 250 litres into that cask there. Filled up and then rolled into one of the warehouses. So we've got 8 warehouses on site. And this is inside this number 3 bond. This is actually the oldest warehouse we have on site. This is one of the dunnage warehouses. So as soon as you walk in here, it's just damp, it's earthy, it's musty. And sometimes you get that in the Springbank products. It's the same idea. If you're walking into bond number 3, you can see all the different cask sizes, from barrels to hogsheads to butts. And there's port pipes there as well, and different vintages as well. So throughout the 8 warehouses we have on site, it's not just a case of maturing everything from 2021 into number 3 bond. Is all it's all mixed between the 8 warehouses. Just in case we lost one of the warehouses, we could operate in a smaller scale. If you're losing a full year's production, it'd be a huge loss to us.
Grant, is that a hogshead, like one of the larger barrels that are there? Because one looks a larger size.
The port pipe, if it's the one, the kind of first one's a port pipe, you see.
Yes, because they're a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So the port pipe is a little bit more elongated.
Mm-hmm.
And then the middle is the one to the right of that is just a normal cask.
Yeah, so you get just in front of the ones that get 3 high, they're all barrels. And then it's still in the front of them, it's hogsheads.
That's
and
what
it's
I was
back to
thinking,
barrels. Yeah, so hogsheads. So it goes from the one with the pile of 3 high, barrels, and then to hogsheads, back to barrels, and then port pipes.
Are those, because the one that's 3 from the racks looks like it's bigger than the barrels and taller than any of those others. But this is a really good slide, because you can see different barrels all laid down next to each other. I don't think I've ever seen a slide showing them. In real life.
I think I've got another one. So there's another one as well. So
that's
the same warehouse, but from the different direction.
Now, we like big butts, so we cannot lie.
Big barrels are a good thing. And you have, so the different barrels are they Madeira, or are they port? Are they the same barrels coming from the same suppliers? And then you're
so from nowadays, the all those casks come from same supplier in Jerez. They sometimes will go the port casks, usually ruby port casks we buy in, but then we'll have obviously these weird and wonderful like Madeira casks and different red wine casks. You can't really see them in this one. There is a lot of red wine casks in this warehouse, but you can't see them in this slide.
Now, is the previous picture and this picture, are they on any of your socials? Are they on an Instagram page, Facebook page, website?
I don't think they are, but certainly I can email them
I would like that picture and the other one that kind of shows the different sizes, because the second one, or the other one that shows the barrels, is a very distinctive in the way that you can see a relationship. So for me, because we're a bunch of geeks when it comes to the production of whiskey, I would love to have those and be able to show people. Yeah,
no problem. Just drop me an email and I can certainly send them to you. Yes, just email grant@springbank.scot and I can email you the pictures. Yeah, we're not we're not got say no, these are our pictures, you're not using them. Yeah, we're quite happy for people to use our
Give me the
pictures.
email address again, please.
grant@springbank.scot.
Scott. Thank you.
Yeah, and then I'll reply with the pictures. No problem. That's one of the still a dunnage warehouse, but it's on 2 different floors. So we've got to hoist the cask up onto the 2nd floor. Yeah, so I think we'll move on to whiskey number 8. So I don't have this one. I don't have the next 2, in fact. So this one here was a single cask bottled for the US. It's a Springbank 8-year-old, 56.3% alcohol, and it's from a first fill sherry hogshead. So when I was looking at it, I'm thinking, where would this whiskey fit into the tasting? And what I spoke to David regarding that, what he can remember of it was very heavy sherry influence to it. So I thought it would work after the Madeira. So hopefully it does. But certainly what I can remember and we can remember of it, it's got a lot of sherry cask influence. So it's lots of dark treacle, sort of marzipan, sort of nutty influence to it. I don't know. I tried to find more information, how many bottles were produced. I don't have all that information. So certainly whoever has the empty bottle should have on the back label how many bottles came from the cask, etc. It's certainly first fill sherry hogshead, 8-year-old at 56.3. So for a good number of years, we were basically doing single casks for various different markets. And what I can remember, we used to do about 4 or 5 single casks for the US every year. Like, so I used to get one for the UK, there's one for bottle for Germany, and so forth. Hopefully it will fit after the Madeira. This one.
This is spectacular. This is really amazing.
Don't tease me, because I've not tried it in years.
The complexity and the flavors.
Best one of the lineup. Oh my goodness.
It is just incredible. And then it's like you have all of this wonderful flavor and notes and characters, and then it kind of just crescendos into the alcohol kind of like wee. So it's just like this, okay, it's really fantastic, and there you go, you're welcome.
So yeah, I mean, 8 years, and it is 8 years in the fresh sherry or first fill sherry hogshead. So, it'll be sort of big and powerful. And even 8 years old, trying 8-year-old Springbanks in the past, they're not harsh, they're not spirity, there's not any usefulness to it. So certainly, hopefully, you certainly agree, and there's a lot of body and bite to it, and we're profitable. So we're now into the bottling side of things, and if you went to Springbank about 4 or 5 years ago, every bottle of Springbank was handled about 8 or 9 times during the bottling of it. But somebody's job was basically to put 4 bottles into a filling head, fill it up to the required, if it was, we'll say 75s or 700s mils we're doing. And then every cork was put in by hand. Somebody else put on the capsule. And then it was held up to this light box to make sure there's no sediment or any spiders or any flies into the whiskey. And then it goes on down the line. So somebody else does the front label, somebody else does the back label, somebody else will put it into the outer case, etc. So it's handled several times during the bottling program. And people say, oh, you could save money and put in a fully automated bottling line. Well, what about the 16 people that work in our bottling line? Yes, we could get rid of them and put in or get it bottled elsewhere. But no, we want to make sure it's bottled on site. A few years ago, certainly, we had to make the decision of putting in a semi-automated line but we've kept in the old-fashioned line as well. So we've actually had to employ more people because we've got 2 different lines at the distillery now. So any of the smaller runs, like limited edition single cask, will go through the old-fashioned line. But then if we're doing a sort of bigger run of, say, Springbank 10 or 15, it'll go through the semi-automated line just to speed things up. Because we were struggling to get whiskey on the market. We couldn't just bottle it fast enough because it was so labour intensive. But now we can sort of do things a lot quicker. This is a wee video of the new bottling plant. So still got to feed the machine with the empty bottles, but it fills it, corks it, capsules it, and labels it all in one sort of big sort of line. So we've got to take the bottle off and still pack it at the end of the line. So we've still got to feed it and then take the bottles out at the other end. But it does speed things up greatly for us.
I need one of those for making 1 ounce samples.
Well, that's what we found. I was doing a lot of online tastings throughout lockdown. Even we normally do a big festival at the distillery, usually just before Isla Whiskey Festival. And this year we went online, and all the sales team, because we weren't traveling, we had to decant so many bottles into sort of little bottles to send out for the tasting packs. And I can remember obviously working from home as well, and at the table behind me I had several bottles of whiskey, and of course the kids doing homeschooling. And one of the times that the kids were on a classroom conference call with the teachers and stuff like that, and they're like seeing all these empty bottles in the background. It was quite entertaining, but they knew I worked for Springbank. But yeah, it's things you have to do, but very, very hard work, decanting several bottles into little samples and then packing up the gift packs and sending them out to people. But it was certainly worthwhile doing.
Vadim, do you have an idea of how many 1 ounce sample bottles you've put together over this virtual tasting series?
Over 100 tastings at least 6 expressions per tasting. A few thousand. I've lost track. My general order for empty bottles is like 3,000 at a time every couple of months.
I sympathize. It is hard work. It is.
It's been a fun year. Those are beautiful.
Yeah.
And you have the labeling down as well in house as well.
Yeah, so even I call him the graphic designer, but the guy who designs our labels, he doesn't use computers. He hand draws them. Okay, nowadays there's got to go to a graphic designer to put it into digital format to go to the printers. But certainly at first point, it's all hand-drawn labels we use. He's in his late 70s, I'll put him. I can remember phoning him up years ago and asked him, can you email me one of the logos I was looking for? And he says, "Dinna be daft, son, I don't do emails." And he still doesn't do emails. And he doesn't use computers. So he says he was going to post it to me. So I wanted a high resolution logo, and he was going to post it to me. So I had to scan it into a computer. It wasn't a high resolution. But it just shows you, and it works for us. But certainly nowadays, with obviously computer formats and stuff like that, yes, he designs them, and then they've got to go to sort of design company to put it in a digital format for printing wise. But we do a lot of that in-house as well now, which is good. We're always looking at ways of where can we put things in-house we're not trying to outsource it. We're looking at ways of what can we do more so ourselves. And that's basically right through now, from malting to bottling, designing labels, printing a lot of labels ourselves now. Yeah, doing it a lot ourselves, which is good. Even, like for, I deal with the UK market, every retailer is basically a customer of mine. We could have went down and sold it all to a wholesaler that does all the work for us. No, we do it all ourselves. So it's a lot of work for myself contacting different customers in the UK, but it's more beneficial for us to do it, and they get more a kind of friendly face at the end of the phone, sort of dealing with it. We don't do supermarket chains and stuff like that, so it's all sort of specialist whiskey retailers that we prefer dealing with for the UK. It works.
Definitely.
Hi, Grant. Can you just talk a little bit about your recent label change?
I was like, well, just this picture popped up and I'm like, oh, we don't use cartons anymore. I need to take that slide out. So we recently decided to do away with the outer carton. So the carton you can see in that picture there, the whole range we are doing away with, apart from the older expressions. So like sort of the whiskies that just came out there, the Springbank 18, there's Longrow 18 bottle, they are in tubes. But like anything sort of younger, the 10, the 12-year-old cask strength, the 15-year-old, the Kilcairn 12, the Kilcairn 16-year-old are just the naked bottle. There is no packaging whatsoever. And we're looking at it, and obviously over the last year, there's been so many issues with cardboard and paper availability and stuff. So, and just try to think, is that something we can stop? Can we try and ease the pressure? And doing away with cartons is one thing we came up with, and doing our bit. So, yeah, we decided, and in speaking to people at different trade shows, Springbank is all about drinking. Do we really need a carton? Okay, it's nice if you're giving it as a gift, but the packaging waste. So that's now what we're looking at now. What ways can we be more environmentally friendly with our packaging and stuff? So yeah, we've done away with the cartons, and we're looking at other ways and what we can sort of minimise sort of wastage now as well, which is it's a nice sort of step forward for us as well. Yeah, so the whiskies that are on the market just now are no cartons whatsoever. The only thing is, as long as the outer case can protect the bottles during shipping, that's the big sort of factor for us, because obviously the cartons do have a job there as well of a bit of protection in the transportation wise, but as long as the outer case we can protect the bottles, we should be okay. So the last whiskey you're going to try, again, something I don't have. It's independent bottling from Chieftains. It's a Springbank 27-year-old, and I forgot the dates and stuff here. It's from 1974 and bottled in 2002, about 56.6% alcohol. So yes, prior to 2001, we sold casks. You could have went to Springbank and bought your own cask of Springbank. Because it was getting too popular, we actually had to stop it, because at one point there was so many casks owned by private individuals. It was an administrative nightmare for us, because it was a great way of getting money in when the company needed money, but at one point we had over 2,500 casks owned by private individuals. That money that came in for that was spent many years ago, but for years there was one person dealing with basically cask owners phoning up, oh, can I get a sample of my cask? Can I get bottle half of it? Can I change it from bourbon into sherry? and doing all these different inquiries, it was certainly a very time-consuming factor for us. So we decided to obviously 2001 stop it and keep it all for ourselves.
Grant, as we pour the last one, I'm gonna exit out of the slide just for a second.
Yeah, that's a slideshow finish, so I can actually come out of it.
Oh, perfect. I just want to say thank you to you for being here. I want to raise a glass to you and to Springbank and invite all of our attendees to hop on camera and join us for the next 2 seconds. Jane, Farina, John,
Right on.
Brian, F, Aaron, Benno. Yeah, well, look, Grant, thank you so much. This was a labor of love. We really appreciate you spending the evening with us.
That's no
Cheers
problem.
to you. Thank you very much for being here. Everyone raise a glass, smile to the camera. Cheese, perfect. That was a great shot. So yeah, thank you to you. Thank you for the awesome liquid, and thank you to Kwa for acquiring all these for us.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
My job's to bring the talent. He took on the job of finding all these bottles. We really wanted to do an OB 27, but I don't have a firstborn to sell, so had to settle for an IB.
Yeah. Well, what have we got coming out? So next year we've got a 30-year-old Springbank coming out next year. That'll be, so obviously the Springbank range, we do the 10-year-old, 12-year-old cast strength, 15-year-old, 18-year-old, 21-year-old, 25. But next year, I think it's going to be about May, there's going to be a 30-year-old Springbank. So it's something to look forward to.
You take livers or kidneys?
Both.
Clear for the 30, yeah, it's got to be at least both. This is going to be an unfair vote, but good luck to you all. May the odds be forever in your favor. You must pick one. Favorite expression overall.
I'm barely smelling the 27, so can't pick yet.
All right, well, smell and pick. I'll give it a couple of minutes, but and then I'll do Grant. Do you have any curiosities about the other? I can do smaller polls as well. I was gonna do
I
one
want the
that's
smaller poll.
in a second. I already launched this one.
It's not
Yeah,
fair
but
with the
so-
27. The 27 is ridiculous.
I think they're all good. I'll do one with the 10, the 15, and the 18, just to see where people sit on just the core 40.
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah.
All right. You know what? I'll start with that one. We're gonna relaunch this one in a second. While people taste the 27, let's see how you feel about the 10, the 15, and the 18. Just the first 3 we tasted. There we go. Votes are coming in. People are less shy about this one. And you tasted them with us, so you're welcome to vote as well.
Just submitted my vote.
Awesome.
Wow, this 27. What the hell?
Yeah, anyone want to take a guess of how much Qua acquired this one for?
$100.
Close.
$800.
Close.
1,000.
So Qua, you can tell everyone. Essentially, I thought it was $1,000, but I was wrong.
It was $900.
Pounds.
Dollars.
You told me pounds.
No, it was like 600 pounds.
Oh, you told me 900 pounds. I was telling everyone it's a $1,400 bottle. Thanks for making me look like a liar. Oh, this is cheap stuff after all.
It's
It retails for $1,000.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. 14 out of 17 voted. The other 3 are taking a nap after all those. Grant, which one do you think was the favorite of the first 3?
I think most will go for the Springbank 18.
All right.
My vote's a 10-year-old, but I think the 18-year-old probably win.
All right. So
15.
Whoa, second.
43% voted 15, 36 voted 18, and then 21% voted 10. So the winner was the 15-year-old.
15, there you go.
People seem to like the sherry cask.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of bourbon drinkers here. They like the sweet stuff.
Oh,
I thought I was going to go for the 15 just because that's generally my favorite, but this version of the 18 is just incredible. So good.
In general, Grant, there's a really nice sort of funky note that I get at the beginning through all of them. Is that from the yeast or what? I mean, I haven't had it a lot with others. I really dig it. Is there a way to?
It's funny that
from?
you mentioned that word funk, and some people do describe Springbank as that damp, earthy, funky note, that damp, so that earthy note to it, and we think it's all to do with the regional status. You get that bit of briny, salty, maritime influence to it as well. Obviously, everything's done on the site and mature. That warehouse, number 3, some of our whiskies taste like as you walk in at number 3, and yeah, it's that earthy funk.
And I mean it in the most complimentary George kind of funk.
It's like damp, dirty, earthy. It sounds awful, but in a really nice way. In a whiskey way, it is really, really good. Yeah.
So Aaron was nice enough to bring out a bottle of what is apparently a cage bottling. Can you tell us a little bit about the Springbank cage?
Yeah, so that came about when I was the shop manager, and just we were renovating the shop a wee bit, and I was saying, like, well, a lot of people are coming into the shop and they're like, oh, we know the 10-year-old, we know the 15-year-old. What have you got we can't buy anywhere else? So we came up with the idea of the distillery manager and his team going into the warehouse, opening up a cask, take a wee sample of it, check the quality in it. If it's good, pour off a bottle, check the age, the strength, cask type, put all that handwritten information onto the label, and that one bottle will go into the cage. It's basically a little cupboard in the shop, which has basically got kind of wire mesh in front of it, like a cage. So that's where the famous cage came from. And yeah, it is literally one bottle. So sort of pulled off casks randomly at the distillery. So, you could go in there. I was in the shop today. There was a fresh port, there was fresh sherry, there was a fresh bourbon, refill claret amongst it as well. Some were 12-year-olds, some were 18-year-olds. So it is just what one bottle pulled off random casks. You can't try before you buy, so you're relying on the distillery team to pick good ones. The Springbanks are all good, but they're all noticeably different, and that's what people love. And yeah, people go crazy for it. And we've actually took the steps over the last year, and it's limited one per person. So, years ago you could walk in and say buy 2 or 3 bottles from the cage, but no, it's that popular now. We had to sort of stop it, and it's one per person, just to try and slow down the sales of it, because we just couldn't bottle them fast enough. And it's great. And yeah, unfortunately, you do see a lot of them going onto auction sites. But yeah, majority are open and enjoyed amongst friends and tastings at this. So that is the famous cage.
Awesome.
Same idea. We've got the washback bar that we've just opened a couple of weeks ago. Going back about 8 years ago, we started keeping some stock back for future tastings and stuff like that. The Springbank was never really one for keeping an archive. People ask us about the 1966 local barleys. Yes, I've tried them, but we don't have any stock of that left. It's all gone. And so we started keeping bottles aside basically for future tastings. But now we've opened this bar. We've got some stock of historical bottlings for use in the bar, which is fantastic. So, like the local barley series that we've done, we've got a couple of cases of each of them from every year for doing a tasting flight. So you can walk into the bar and say, can I buy a local barley flight and try all 6 of the local barleys we've done over the last few years, 6 years, in one tasting. It's cost you £100, but it's not expensive for what it is and stuff. Then we've got some people talk about the old 97 vintages we used to do many years ago. We've got some bottles of that hiding away. there was a other sort of old wood expression bottles and stuff as well. So yeah, it was really, really good for that.
All right, we gave everybody a chance to try the last pour. I'm gonna relaunch this one. Clear the results, perfect. Yep. So we're gonna relaunch your favorite expression of the entire night. I want to see, I want to see how many people are going to go for age or how many people are actually going to go for number or taste. There was not a bad one in the bunch, but I think when we got to the cast strength offerings, it was a new world. You were right.
And hopefully the order worked for you all. It worked for me. But hopefully you agreed with the way that I done the tasting.
Absolutely, yeah. It for me got progressively sweeter and sweeter. So like the Madeira and the sherry were like nice dessert finishes, which was perfect, which is what you would want.
The 10-year local was one of my favorites.
Nice.
I mean, you have some really amazing expressions, but the 10-year just had, like I think Kwa said, a lot of us started it with bourbons and a little bit more sweet, a little more corn forward in the mash, and so that something about that just really was fantastic to me. But the
20% of corn.
I think the bourbon cast local barleys are some of my favorite Springbank, just because it screams Springbank.
Yeah, the local barleys just in general, like I find them to be like so unique. Just like even for Springbank, like it's just compared to like any other whiskey, there's nothing else to me like really similar to it. They're just so incredible.
I see Matt was trying to say something. Matt Psyche.
Hey, just a random question for Grant. Have any idea why we didn't get the Longo Red this year in the States? Because I'm trying to collect them every year, and I was waiting for that refill Malbec to no avail. And in the UK, they go like, maybe that's part of the problem.
Yes, there's a big following now for the Red series. So yeah, every year, there's about 9,000 bottles. It's the same roughly number of bottles every year. But there is ones that just want to buy it and make money on it, which is quite annoying for the ones who want to drink it. So yeah, it's just a case of trying to keep in with your local retailer, and I mean it's the same number of bottles that is distributed throughout the world. So it's just trying to keep in with your local retailer and say, look, keep one aside for me. So yeah, we'll do ones every year. Every year there'll be a new expression of it. So next year, it's Malbec's a 15-year-old that's coming out in, I think it's February. Yeah, so look out for that one. Just keep your word in and a local retailer, and then they should get, if you've got an allocation beforehand, the chances are they'll get the same. So hopefully you'll be in luck and get one.
Actually got a side question, not specifically actually about Springbank, but Kilkerran. A couple of years ago, we got like a really like incredible 15-year-old single cask Oloroso. And I was wondering, do you happen to know if there's any like plans to like release any other like Kilkerran single casks here? Because there hasn't really been much since then.
There's no, we've been kind of looking at the single cask things and seeing where they want to go with them. We're not doing many at all now for different markets at all, not even for the UK. So there will be various limited releases in Kilkerran, but not as such as single cask for certain markets. The only way you can get a smaller release is maybe trying to get hold of our festival bottlings. Yeah, 15-year-old single cask was superb. So yeah, the festival bottlings of that, they're smaller runs. So every year at our open day, you need to try and visit us around about May, just before Isla Festival, and we'll do sort of smaller runs in Kilkerran, Springbank and stuff as well. So
you're saying I should milk my 15-year single cask as long as I possibly can?
Yes, what I'm saying. Yes, enjoy it. Because there's no plans for doing anything similar. Obviously the Kilkerran range now we'll do a 12-year-old, 16-year-old, 8-year cast strength, and there'll be the heavily peated series as well. So we'll do 2 bottles of the heavily peated every year, but that is the Kilkerran range at the moment.
Is the 16 going to be a limited release, or is it going to be?
It's a core product, but limited for a good number of years. The problem with the 16-year-old is we're basically going back when we started doing the work in progress series. The work in progress series, when we've done the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old, 7-year-old, etc. That was all stock from 2004. So when we brought out the 16-year-old, a lot of the 2004, 2005 stock is now being used up. So there was not much to bring out as 16 years old. So, but in a couple of years' time, there'll be a little bit more volume of it. So yeah, it's limited, very limited for the first few years, and then stocks get a wee bit easier of it.
And is Kilkerran going to have different cask mixtures every release? There's always be the 16 bourbon, or is it going to switch up sometime?
Yeah, what we're going to do is the 16 will be a bit more bourbon influence. This is what we're looking at. This year's is got bourbon and sherry, certainly, but a bit more bourbon influence is what we're looking for the 16-year-old. I can tell you it's been the 8-year cast strength is going to go down the route a bit more a sherry influence, but the next release of the 8-year cast strength, we looked at it with what cask we have, and it is port and sherry. And we thought, do we mix them together? No, we're actually going to do a Kilkerran 8-year cast strength in port and the 8-year cast strength in sherry. It's just a 1 year off because we felt they're both really good, and it'd be nice to try them sort of separately. So yes, you need to try and buy the 2 bottles of the next release of the 8-year cast strengths. But generally speaking, after that, I'll be more 8-year cast strength and be sherry.
Can you hook us up with like a couple cases just for our club?
Please.
You need to speak to David, who was meant to do the tasting. So yeah, speak to David and see. Obviously, he deals with the US market, and see what he can do for you. David is in London. I was meant to go to London to do a tasting tomorrow, but with family commitments, David, we swapped. So I'm doing the tasting for yourselves tonight, and David's in London for a tasting. He's got a tasting tomorrow at the Whisky Show, part of Specialty Drinks, the Whisky Exchange show. A tasting of, what's he got? He's got, he's the one 21-year-olds that's coming out next year. 2 different Springbank 21-year-olds. The Springbank 30-year-old is coming out next year, and 2 different Longbow 21-year-olds. That's his tasting he's got that I had arranged to do. He was quite happy to go and do it for me. Yeah, that's what David Allen is. So
hopefully he feels guilty about standing us up, and we can turn that into something.
I think so too. Yeah, just
yes.
Yeah.
Make sure you put in a good word for us. Tell him nice. Yeah. Hopefully we weren't a terrible group.
No, it's been great.
So we all voted for our favorite expression of the night. Do you want to take a guess of what the favorite tonight was?
I would probably say the local barley.
You know your products very well.
Local barley, yeah.
36%, 5 out of 14 voted for the local barley, 4 voted for the 27, 2 and 2 for the 17-year Madeira and the 8-year sherry cask, and then 1 for the 12 cask strength. So kind of all over the board, but local barley takes it over the $1,000 27-year. That's awesome.
It just shows you that sometimes age and money doesn't. When I was lucky enough to try the Springbank 1919 a good number of years ago, that was the one when I started the company. It was £7,500. Then the price went up to 10,000 after we sold one, and the price went up to £14,000. And the last bottle we had in the company we sold for £50,000. And I tried it when I was sitting about 14,000, and it was good. £14,000 worth good. Yeah. It was 50-year-old Springbank, so it was a lot of cask influence. It was woody, it was earthy, it was it was certainly a nice opportunity to try it. I can remember when we sold it as well. I was doing the guy paid so much by bank transfer, and they came over and put the rest in his credit card, and I was doing the credit card transaction, like 3, 5, 0, 0, 0. So make sure the right number of zeros. But yeah, to show you sometimes age is not always the best.
Agreed. No, I completely agree, Grant.
Mm-hmm.
This has been fantastic. I was not familiar with Springbank, and thank you, Kwa and Vadim and David, who's not here in London doing some tasting, for putting this together. I am completely blown away. I am mesmerized by it. And so let me ask this question and this could be open to Grant or anybody. So since I'm not familiar with Springbank, it's not sold in grocery stores, so it's just bottle shops. Is this something that is more like the 10-year? How would somebody like me, who's a neophyte, go about getting that?
Total Wine.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? This has been absolutely fantastic. So this tasting, Kwa gave up essentially all his Springbank for us to be able to enjoy this, and we appreciate it. And we organized this because he's such a fan, and it was his birthday a couple of days ago. So if you will all indulge me, we should all sing happy birthday.
Oh, this
so everyone go off mute.
So horrible. This is what makes it entertaining, because
it's so entertaining when everybody's
time delayed.
It's wonderful. So I need everyone to unmute.
Okay.
And we're all gonna sing happy birthday together and make Kwa blush. Let me see. How do I get everyone to unmute? Is there a button that unmutes everyone? So if everybody's ready, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kwa. Happy birthday to you.
It's still recording.
Thank you.
That's why we did it. It was great. We got to go bigger for your next birthday, Kwa. So just so you know, start planning it.
I don't have that much whiskey.
Lies. Not anymore. It's okay. You got a year. Grant, thank you so much for taking the time to spend the evening with us. We really, really appreciate it. I know you guys don't have any reps here in America, so it's a feat, and we appreciate you logging in from Scotland and join us here on a Saturday night. I'm sure you'd rather be spending time with your family.
That'd be good. I mean, really enjoyed it. Fantastic. And this is, people do ask me if, when I get back on the road doing tastings, will these continue? And I think so. I think it'll be a good mixture of, yes, everybody likes the face-to-face tastings and going to trade shows, etc. But this is such a great way of doing things as well. Sitting back in your comfort of your own home, sending out the wee tasting packs. Yes, some people might log in later on and go back to the tasting if the time didn't suit. And I think this will continue quite a bit more so, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've done, like as David mentioned, we've done over 100 of these since April of last year. And yeah, in person is great. We did an in-person event last Saturday, and they're fantastic. But you're absolutely right. There's something to the comfort of your own home. You don't have to drive anywhere. And the fact that we have people here from Seattle, we have people from the East Coast, we're in Los Angeles, you're in Scotland, and we can all enjoy a dram together. There's something magical about that.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So thank you for joining us. If you're ever in town, we'll be happy to host you. We look forward to seeing you again on a future, either in person or virtual tasting.
It's I've worked for the company for so many years, and I've been all around Europe, been to Russia and what have you. I've never made it to America. Never.
Wow.
So I think about time. I think David, you go to London, I'm going to America.
That's right. You should.
Come out to the West Coast.
You have friends in LA.
I would love to. Yeah, definitely.
You know, you speak about the nice beaches in Campbelltown. Come check out the beaches here. They're not so bad. They measure up. They'll be okay.
Yeah, that's okay. And you've got some golf courses there as well here.
A few.
Yeah, there's a couple.
A few.
Well,
Thank you,
thank you
Grant.
so much. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to Grant.
Yeah, right.
Cheers,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Bye bye.
I know.